Case File 88C, Fairfax County, Virginia. Subject: Dr. Marcus Thorne. Officer: Corporal David Miller, FCPD. Incident: a late-night traffic stop on Georgetown Pike, initiated for an alleged failure to maintain a single lane. The subject, a black man in a tuxedo, was operating a late-model Lincoln Continental. The officer's initial assessment, as later revealed by body cam audio, was suspicion of driving under the influence or, more pointedly, operating a stolen vehicle. The stop quickly escalated from a routine check to a roadside interrogation fueled by racial bias. But Corporal Miller had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He hadn't pulled over a chauffeur, a valet, or a criminal. He had detained one of the most powerful and protected men in the United States government. This is the anatomy of that stop, a confrontation that would end one man's career and expose the fragile line between authority and prejudice. The deep, resonant tones of a Bach cello suite filled the cabin of the Lincoln, a serene counterpoint to the inky blackness of the Virginia woods lining Georgetown Pike. Dr. Marcus Thorne drove with a practiced ease, his hands resting lightly on the wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. The crisp white of his shirt and the black silk of his bow tie felt constricting after a 4-hour diplomatic gala in Washington, D.C., a necessary performance of handshakes and veiled conversations. He was director of the Central Intelligence Agency, a title that felt absurdly distant in moments like this. Tonight, he was just Marcus, a man tired from a long day of shepherding the nation's secrets, heading home to the quiet solitude of his McLean estate. He had dismissed his security detail for the final leg of the journey, a small act of rebellion he allowed himself on rare occasions. He needed the silence, the illusion of normalcy, to decompress. The Lincoln, a GSA-leased vehicle, was deliberately unremarkable, black, sleek, but devoid of the aggressive features that would draw attention. It was a ghost, designed to blend in. Then, the night was fractured. A supernova of red and blue light erupted in his rearview mirror, painting the polished dashboard in strobing flashes of alarm. There was no siren, just the silent, aggressive pulse of the light bar. Thorne's heart rate remained perfectly steady, a testament to years of training in environments far more hostile than a suburban road. He checked his speedometer, 54 in a 55 zone. He hadn't drifted, hadn't swerved. He knew immediately what this was. He signaled, pulling the heavy sedan smoothly onto the gravel shoulder. He killed the engine, turned off the music, and lowered all 4 windows. He placed his hands on the steering wheel, fingers interlaced, and waited. The interior dome light cast a soft glow on his face, illuminating the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes. Through the windshield, he watched the officer approach in the side mirror, a silhouette moving with a deliberate, predatory swagger. A high-powered flashlight beam sliced through the cabin, momentarily blinding him. It danced across his face, his tuxedo, the empty passenger seat, before settling on his hands. "Evening," a gruff voice said from just behind his shoulder. "Good evening, officer," Thorne replied, his voice calm and even. License and registration, it wasn't a request. It was a command, clipped and impatient. Of course, Thorne moved with slow, deliberate motions. He reached into his jacket, retrieved his wallet, and extracted his Virginia driver's license. From the glove compartment, he produced the vehicle's registration and proof of insurance. He passed the documents out the window. The officer, a burly white man whose name tag read D. Miller, snatched the papers. He shone his light on the license. "Dr. Marcus Thorne," he read aloud, a note of derision in his voice, as if the title were a joke. "Doctor of what?" "Stealing cars." Thorne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He said nothing. He had been here before, in different cars, in different cities, wearing different clothes. The script was always depressingly familiar. Corporal Miller lingered, his flashlight beam continuing its invasive exploration of the car. "This is a nice ride. You come into some money tonight." "It's a government vehicle, officer," Thorne stated plainly. Miller grunted, walking back to his patrol car. The strobing lights continued their frantic dance, a silent disco of intimidation on the side of the dark road. Thorne watched him in the mirror. He saw the officer speaking into his radio, then typing into his patrol car's laptop. The wait was part of the process, designed to unnerve, to create an imbalance of power. But Marcus Thorne's entire life was spent managing power dynamics. He was not unnerved. He was, however, growing weary. Minutes stretched into an eternity. A car slowed as it passed, its occupants silhouetted gawkers at the roadside drama. Finally, Miller emerged from his vehicle, walking back to the Lincoln with the same heavy-footed gait. He tossed the documents onto the passenger seat through the open window. Registration comes back to a GSA fleet lease, Miller said, his tone thick with suspicion. What department you with? Post office. He smirked, the flashlight beam once again finding Thorne's eyes. I work for the federal government, Thorne answered, offering nothing more. Evasion was a tool, but so was strategic simplicity. I'm going to need you to step out of the car, sir. Thorne's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. For what reason, officer? I smell alcohol on your breath. You were swerving back there. We're going to have a little chat. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Thorne hadn't had a drink all night. His position forbade it at public functions. The claim of swerving was a classic, flimsy pretext. This was the pivot point, the moment a traffic stop ceases to be about traffic. I have not been drinking, and I was maintaining my lane, Thorne said, his voice dropping a register, losing its polite edge and gaining a flinty firmness. You have no probable cause for this escalation. Miller's face hardened. The folksy racism evaporated, replaced by raw, undisguised hostility. Is that so? You a lawyer now, too? Get out of the damn car before I pull you out. Thorne took a slow, deep breath. He had wanted a quiet drive home. He had wanted 15 minutes of peace. It seemed he wouldn't get it. He unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door, stepping out onto the gravel shoulder. The air was cool and damp. He stood to his full height, 6'2", his tailored tuxedo giving him a silhouette of quiet dignity against the flashing chaos. He smoothed the front of his jacket. Hands on the hood, Miller barked. Thorne turned, placing his palms flat on the cool metal of his car's hood. He could feel the engine's residual warmth. He saw his own reflection distorted in the glossy black paint, a man of consequence being treated like a common criminal. Miller's pat-down was rough, invasive. He ran his hands aggressively over Thorne's body, lingers a moment too long at his waist. What did you do tonight? Serve champagne to some big shots. The question hung in the air, dripping with condescension. Thorne remained silent, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the police lights. He knew his detail would be aware of the stop by now. They monitored his vehicle's GPS and would have been alerted the moment he was stationary for more than 2 minutes. They would be holding position, waiting for his signal, or for the situation to cross a predefined threat threshold. Miller was rapidly approaching that line. Not much of a talker, are you? Miller continued, his voice a low growl in Thorne's ear. That's fine. I want to take a look inside your car now. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle, Thorne said clearly, his voice resonating with an authority that seemed to momentarily surprise the officer. Miller stepped back, a humorless smile twisting his lips. You don't consent? That's adorable. Your lack of consent, combined with the smell of booze and your uncooperative attitude, gives me all the probable cause I need. We can do this the easy way, or I can call a K-9 unit down here, and we can spend the next 2 hours tearing this car apart while you sit in cuffs. Your choice, doctor. This was it. The final escalation. The point where procedure was fully weaponized. Thorne slowly turned his head to look directly at the officer. The body cam on Miller's chest would be capturing this perfectly. The cool, unwavering gaze of a man who had faced down terrorists and hostile foreign leaders, now fixed on a local cop on a power trip. Corporal Miller, Thorne began, his voice devoid of any emotion save for a profound, chilling seriousness. Your badge number is 3481. You are operating under the incorrect assumption that you are in control of this situation. You are not. Miller scoffed, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. The sudden use of his name and badge number was unexpected. Oh yeah? And who are you? The King of England. You initiated this stop without cause, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Thorne continued, his tone like a prosecutor laying out an indictment. You fabricated the claim of smelling alcohol, which will be disproven by a breathalyzer I will gladly take. You have conducted an illegal search of my person, and now you are threatening to conduct an illegal search of a United States government vehicle. You have made a series of grave professional errors tonight. The officer's bravado began to crack. You think you can talk your way out of this? You've got another thing coming. No, Corporal, Thorne said, slowly lowering his hands from the hood and turning to face him fully. You do. He reached deliberately into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Miller's hand instinctively went to the grip of his sidearm. Don't move, he yelled, his voice suddenly shrill. Thorne froze for a second, then continued the motion, slow and visible. I am retrieving my identification, officer. I suggest you observe it very carefully. His hand emerged not with a wallet, but with a slim, dark blue leather case. He flipped it open with his thumb. Inside, behind a protective layer of plastic, was a photo ID bearing his face. But it wasn't the credential that mattered. It was the Great Seal of the United States embossed in gold above it, and the bold letters printed beneath his name. Director, Central Intelligence Agency. He held it out. The beam from Miller's flashlight fell upon the credential, illuminating the title. For a full 5 seconds, there was absolute silence, broken only by the crackle of the police radio and the chirping of crickets in the woods. The light trembled in Miller's hand. The color drained from his face, his ruddy complexion turning a sickly, pasty white under the strobing lights. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. That's a fake, he finally stammered, the words lacking any conviction. That's a federal crime. Thorne's expression was unyielding. Corporal Miller, my protective detail has been monitoring this entire interaction. They are located approximately 400 yards behind you, in a black Chevrolet Suburban. They have a direct audio and video feed. They have, until now, followed my standing orders to not intervene in routine law enforcement encounters. However, your escalating hostility has placed this situation on the verge of being reclassified as a potential threat against a senior government official. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the humid night air. You have 2 options, Thorne said, his voice now a blade of ice. Option 1. You return to your vehicle, you inform your dispatcher that the stop was a mistake, and you leave immediately. I will then decide whether to handle this matter internally or through official channels. Option 2. You continue on your current path. In approximately 30 seconds, my detail will move to secure me. They are federal agents with the authority to use any means necessary to neutralize a perceived threat. You will be disarmed and detained. Your career will be over. The ensuing jurisdictional conflict between your department and the federal government will be a nightmare for your chief, your county executive, and potentially the governor of this state. I strongly advise you to choose option 1. Miller stared at the ID, then at Thorne's face, then back at the ID. The arrogant enforcer was gone, replaced by a man staring into the abyss of his own monumental error. He was visibly trembling. But you were swerving, he whispered, the pathetic defense of a man who knew he was utterly and completely ruined. No, I wasn't, Thorne replied flatly. He took a small step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, for Miller's ears and the body cam alone. You saw a black man in a tuxedo driving a nice car, and your mind filled in the rest of the story. You assumed I was a servant or a thief. It never occurred to you that I could be the one who owns the house, let alone the one who runs the entire damn intelligence community. That is your failure, Corporal, not mine. Thorne then lifted his gaze to a point just over Miller's shoulder, into the darkness of the road behind the patrol car. Olympus has fallen, he said, his voice carrying just enough for the ambient microphones in his own vehicle to pick it up. It was a prearranged code phrase, not the most severe one, but enough to signal that the situation required management. Miller, hearing the strange phrase, flinched. He looked wildly over his shoulder into the blackness. And then, as if summoned from the night itself, a pair of headlights flashed on and off, far down the road. A moment later, another set. The corporal's radio crackled to life with a frantic, high-pitched voice. Unit 3481, what's your status? We're getting a priority call from State Police Dispatch, command level. They're saying to stand down. Repeat, Corporal Miller, stand down immediately. Do not engage. A supervisor is en route. Miller looked as if he'd been punched. He lowered his flashlight, its beam now pointing uselessly at the gravel. He stared at Thorne, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. He had not just pulled over a powerful man. He had harassed, threatened, and humiliated a ghost, a man whose entire existence was predicated on moving through the world unseen, a man who held the nation's darkest secrets in his head. The wail of a different siren began to grow in the distance, this one approaching fast. A Fairfax County police supervisor's vehicle screamed around the bend, pulling up behind Miller's car and bathing the scene in even more flashing light. At the same time, a black, unmarked Chevrolet Suburban, the one Thorne had mentioned, materialized from the darkness and pulled onto the shoulder in front of the Lincoln, its powerful engine a low growl. Two men in dark suits emerged, their movements fluid and economical. They didn't look at Miller. Their entire focus was on Thorne. "Director, are you secure?" one of them asked, his hand resting inside his jacket. "I'm fine, Agent Harris," Thorne said, his composure absolute. He slipped his credential case back into his pocket. "The situation is being resolved." A police sergeant, a man with graying temples and a panicked look on his face, scrambled out of the supervisor's car and rushed toward them. He took one look at the suited federal agents, at the director of the CIA, standing calmly by his car, and at his own corporal, who now looked like a statue of pure terror. "Sir," the sergeant said, his voice strained as he addressed Thorne. "Sir, I am Sergeant Riley. On behalf of the Fairfax County Police Department, I apologize. Is there anything we can do?" Thorne looked from the sergeant to the now catatonic Corporal Miller. "You can secure your officer, Sergeant. He is clearly not in a state to be carrying a firearm." Sergeant Riley nodded numbly. "Miller, get over here. Now." Miller moved as if in a trance, stumbling toward his supervisor. The sergeant met him halfway, hissing in a low, furious voice. "What did you do? What in God's name did you do?" He took Miller's arm and guided him back toward his patrol car, effectively placing him in custody without the cuffs. The bystanders who had been watching from their slowed cars were now joined by a resident from a nearby house, drawn out by the commotion. A teenager stood on the edge of the lawn, his phone held up, its small red light indicating it was recording everything. The silent cameras had borne witness. Thorne turned to his agent. "Get me the chief of police on the phone. And get me the Attorney General's chief of staff." "Yes, sir," Agent Harris replied, already speaking into his wrist communicator. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Corporal David Miller was immediately suspended without pay. His body cam footage, which was not subject to the same public records laws as his federal counterparts, was nonetheless entered into evidence in an internal affairs investigation that lasted less than 72 hours. The video recorded by the teenage bystander went viral within a day, a grainy but damning portrait of unchecked bias. It didn't show the credential, but it showed every condescending word, every aggressive move. The headline was irresistible. Local cop Harris's black man in tuxedo on side of road. The truth was even more explosive. Facing immense public pressure and a direct inquiry from the Department of Justice, spurred by an informal but pointed call from the CIA's director, the Fairfax County Police Department fired Miller for gross misconduct and violations of departmental policy. The county settled a civil rights lawsuit filed by the ACLU on Thorne's behalf for an undisclosed sum, which he immediately donated to a scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in law and public service. The incident forced the department into a federal consent decree mandating sweeping reforms in anti-bias and de-escalation training. 2 weeks later, Dr. Marcus Thorne stood at the panoramic window of his office on the 7th floor of the original headquarters building in Langley. The sprawling campus was quiet, a bastion of secrets nestled in the Virginia woods, not far from where he had been stopped. On his desk was a file. It was a comprehensive background report on David Miller, compiled with the terrifying efficiency of his agency. It detailed a man with a history of complaints, a pattern of aggressive behavior, and a life marked by mediocrity and resentment. A bully with a badge. Thorne felt no triumph, only a profound sense of exhaustion. He held one of the highest positions of trust and power in the world. He commanded spies, analyzed threats to national security, and briefed the President of the United States. Yet, on a dark road a few miles from his home, none of that had mattered. He had been reduced to a stereotype, his identity erased and replaced by a racist caricature. The tuxedo, a symbol of his access to the highest echelons of power, had been twisted into a costume of servitude in the officer's eyes. His private line buzzed. It was the Attorney General. "Marcus," the voice on the other end said. "I saw the final report from our Civil Rights Division. It's as bad as we thought. We're moving forward with the consent decree." "Good," Thorne replied, his eyes still fixed on the view outside. "That's a start. I'm sorry you had to go through that, my friend. Truly, we all go through it," Thorne said, and the "we" was heavy with meaning. "The only difference is that I had a credential in my pocket that could end a man's career. Most people just have a driver's license. And sometimes, that's not even enough to keep them alive." There was a moment of silence on the line. "What do you need, Marcus?" the Attorney General asked. Thorne turned from the window, his gaze falling on the seal of the agency carved into his mahogany desk. "I need you to keep fighting," he said, "and I'll do the same. This isn't just about one bad cop. It's about the system that allows him to flourish. Our work is far from over." He ended the call and stood there for a long time, a silent figure in a silent office, a man who carried the weight of the world's secrets and the weight of his own skin. The vindication was real, but it was hollow. The real victory, he knew, wouldn't come from a single, dramatic roadside confrontation, but from the slow, arduous, and unending work of changing the hearts and minds of a nation, one traffic stop, one interaction, one person at a time.